the very tail end of it all, she got one last envelope. This envelope would change our lives.
Just trying to give you something spooky. I'll do for you. I'm just trying to give you something.
Okay, story time. How did we get here? Well, it's a long progression. Let's take it back to childhood, okay? My parents were very hardworking people. My father was in the Marines, and my mother was a teacher. For lack of a better term, a teacher. She worked at Bryman colleges, and she was teaching medical assisting, phlebotomy, CPR, things like that. As a child, I was never too fond of school. I didn't like it. It was boring. I didn't have the best teachers, at least in my opinion. And, I'm a little kid. What do I know? So I would get in the car, and on some days she would drive me to school and drop me off if she was going that way. Otherwise, I would take the bus. And so every now and then, I just didn't feel good. I didn't want to go to school. I prefer to stay home. My mother would tell me, go to school anyway. You're not that sick. And it's kind of hard to pretend sick when, your mother's a health professional, especially a teacher. It's just not going to go over well. So she would carpool, and as we were getting from where I lived to the light, which was, I would say, a good quarter mile away, maybe 3/4 of a mile, she would get so wrapped up in the conversation she's having with her friend that she would forget I was in the back seat, and I knew this. I would be absolutely dead silent. She wouldn't have any music playing, so I had to be extremely quiet. And mind you, during this time, there was no such thing as cell phones. There were no pagers that were widely available. People didn't have social media. Internet really wasn't that much of a thing yet. And I remember her forgetting I was in the back seat until she got to work. And the moment she started to say, I'm kind of early, I said, hey, Mom, are you going to take me to school today? And she says, oh, boy, I forgot you were in the back seat. I guess you're just going to have to come to school with me today. And this absolutely delighted me. I had never gone to work with my mom. I'd never gone to work with my dad. More on that later. We proceeded to go into her class. And I don't know if this was my mom's way of kind of teaching me a lesson, but just like every kid, they have a phobia of needles and getting stuck. And today was phlebotomy day all of a sudden. And the one thing my mother said was that everybody had to participate. Everybody needed a partner. And as she says this, a sense of dread came over me. I started to count heads in the class. 1, 2, 3, 4, 28, 29. I counted again, 29 again. I counted again, 29. No matter how much I counted, there was 29. And I looked at my mother and I said, Mom, does this mean I have to participate? And she says to me, yep, you have to participate. And I said, well, that makes me number 30. That makes an even number. That means one of these grown adults get to take my little baby arm and use it as a phlebotomy test cushion. This terrified me. I was watching the other students. Some were missing veins. Some weren't getting the needle in far enough. Some were pushing the needle in way too far. Everybody was learning and making mistakes. I saw veins collapse. I saw blood pool. I saw bubbles and bodily fluids coming out of things and people looking green and pale, and just, it was a very traumatic thing. And I'm sure it really wasn't like that. But this is what I saw. This is my perception of it. So my mom comes to me and she says, when are you going to pick up a needle? When are you going to do your job? And I said to her, I'm not doing it. Nope, you can't get me to do it. And after an hour of this back and forth with my mother, she finally told me she wouldn't have me participate because I really wasn't her student, I was her son. And we went to lunch. We had a really good lunch. I don't even remember what we had. I'm pretty sure I had a hamburger or something from somewhere close by. But that day, never forget it. It was amazing. I ended up with one of our students playing saxophone for me when we came back from lunch. We got back a little bit early. I remember getting my first cat that day. It was an all-white Persian cat with blue and a green eye. Alex. I remember coming home that day, and again, I was speechless in the car, and I typically would just sleep in the car because LA traffic has always been terrible. So we made it home, and my mom says, I hope you learned something today. And I did. I went back to school. About a year later, my mom pulls me aside. I don't even know what we were doing, but I remember this conversation vividly. And she asked me, she says, son, I know you're still kind of young, but your brother is not as young as you. And I've always wanted to be a doctor. What do you think? And I said, well, what does that mean? 'Cause I had no idea. I thought it was just like any other job. You know, someone came to you and said, hey, you're going to do that. I had no concept. You know, I'm like 5, 6 years old. And she says, well, it's going to require a lot of studying. It's going to mean that I don't have time to spend much time with you. And I'm thinking in my head, like, you really don't do a lot with me now because I spend most of my time outside with my friends. And during the week, I stay home and I study my books, I do my homework, and that's it. That's the extent of my life. So I didn't realize what she was saying, and I said, sure, Mom, go right ahead. So she said, okay. And she asked me for like a month, are you sure about this? I said, yeah, go ahead. I think she expected more resistance because, you know, she would always tell me this is her dream. She wants to be a doctor. She wants to be a surgeon. And she started doing her research. Now, fast forward about 6 years later, my mom asked me one last time. She says, okay, I'm ready to make the move. I'm ready to be a doctor. I need you to help me. And I looked at her and I said, okay, Mom, but what do you need? What can I do? I'm just a kid. And she says, well, I need to go interview in quite a few places. Now, the interview process has totally changed. It's nowhere near as complicated as it was. But my mom, my father, and myself, we packed the car up and we made a road trip out of it. We went to hospital after hospital from here to Missouri and back. And we'll talk about Kirksville, Missouri much later. But for now, just know that was like, it seemed like an eternity. Again, there's no internet, there's no phones, there's no Google, Spotify, none of this, no YouTube, nothing. And so a road trip meant sitting in a car for however long my parents decided to drive, sleeping in that car, eating in that car, just sitting there, looking at the country. And the US is a huge place. It took forever. And we finally get to our last stop, and it's snowing and it's cold. And my mom goes in for her interview, and I remember her coming out, and she had been so nervous about this place in Missouri. And when she came out, she just had this look on her face like, that's it? And I don't know if she was let down by it. I don't know if just the excitement of it all had just kind of worn her down, but I remember her sleeping. And my father drove. We stopped to get some food. I think it was a Carl's Jr. or something. Maybe it was a Hardee's. I don't know, but I do know it was some kind of a burger. And I remember my mom saying, I want to eat. And she would eat. And then she would sleep a little bit more. And I think that whole day, my father drove. And it was one of the few times that I heard him say, I think we should just stop at a hotel and spend the day in a hotel and just kind of relax. And we went to a Days Inn. For me, it was like a great vacation because I get to go in the pool. I get to enjoy spending time with Dad. And sometimes Mom would even get in the pool too. And most times we would stop during this trip. We were the only families with little kids there. And so I'd have the pool to myself. The adults wouldn't get in there. We wouldn't see the adults. So it was all for us. Well, we made it back home, and my mom says, okay, this is gonna take some time. And about a year later, she gets a letter in the mail, and she's in her room, and it's just her and myself are at home. And I had this kind of standing rule with my family of whenever I'd go out, I could go out anywhere in the neighborhood as long as I came home in like an hour. Of course, I never made it on time, and I'd get yelled at, but I was having fun. I was a little kid. I was doing what I was supposed to do, and I understood that my parents were concerned and they just wanted to check on my well-being. But I remember my mom getting this huge envelope. I've never seen one that big, ever. And she pulled it out of the mail, and I saw her pull it out of the mail. She looked through it. There were bills and bills and bills, and random pieces of trash mail like the penny saver. Not that the penny saver is trash, but at the time we considered it junk mail. And she had this big envelope, and I remember her standing there at the mailbox, and it was like she was just stuck. So she goes to her room, she closes the door, which is extremely rare for her. She would sleep with her door closed, or, in the morning when she'd wake up, she would shower and groom herself, and the door wouldn't be open until she was ready to come out. That was a general sign of, hey, I'm ready to be present, or, if you need something, I'm here. But to see her that early in the day go in her room and close the door, and just, you don't hear the TV, you don't hear anything, I was a little bit concerned. So I didn't go back out. I stayed home. And it was a little bit of time. I don't know how much time, but it couldn't have been that long. It was maybe 30 minutes. And I remember her coming downstairs, and she was just white as a ghost. And I don't ever recall seeing her like that ever again. And she says, well, I got some news today. I said, okay, what is it?